Welcome back to the Found Frequency Podcast, your space for that alignment, expansion, and of course, unstoppable energy. I'm your host, Fallon, and I'm so excited to have you here today. I keep hearing the same thing over and over again, so of course, I've got to talk about it. You know that conversation of like, I just don't know what I want, or I need more clarity, or I don't know what my purpose is, or I'm going to wait until I know more, right? Every time I hear those words, I have to smile a little bit because I've lived them. I have lived them. I have felt them. I've asked the exact same questions, and I've sat there wishing someone would just hand me over a map of my next direction. Tell me the purpose. Tell me the path that I'm meant to be on. Tell me the next 10 steps so that I can finally relax, so I can chill out, But life has obviously taught me something very different, I don't think clarity is actually what you're looking for. I think what you're after is certainty. And those are completely two different things. Somehow we've convinced ourselves that before we move, we need to know exactly what's going on. We need to know every step. We need to know how it's going to work. We need to know who we're becoming in the process and what's on the other side. And life is supposed to hand us this map, this perfect curated map to take, before we can take the first step. But I want you to honestly tell me, when has life ever worked out like that? Definitely hasn't for me, and I guarantee it hasn't for you either. Not for anyone that I've ever met. The greatest moments of your life probably weren't planned. The people who changed you, the opportunities that arrived for you, the conversations that altered your direction, right? The love, the heartbreak, the unexpected turns. Most of them arrived while you were busy living, not while you were still sitting there trying to think your way into certainty. And this is what I've really come to believe. Clarity isn't something that you think your way into, right? You can't think your way to clarity. It is literally something that you have to live your way into. You don't think your way to your purpose. You participate your way to your purpose. You don't figure life out, right? You experience life. And somewhere along the way, life quietly reveals itself to you. I actually think purpose is one of the most misunderstood conversations that we have in personal development. It's almost like we've turned our purpose into a problem that needs to be solved. As if one day the universe is just going to send us an email and it's going to be like, hey, you got it. Congrats. Finally figured out what you're supposed to do while you're here. Like, go you. But purpose isn't a destination. It's a relationship. It's a conversation. It's a mystery that you get to live, not a puzzle that you have to solve, and that changes things because the pressure suddenly dissipates, right? You don't have to know exactly where you're going. You simply have to become willing to weave yourself into life, into conversations and curiosity and experiences and people, into the unexpected and into the present moment. Because life has this beautiful habit of revealing the next step for you, only after you've taken the first one, only after you've taken the step in front of you. And that's the conversation that I want to have today, and clearly I'm pretty passionate about it, okay? I want you to think about your own life for a second here. Think about it honestly, okay? How many of the most meaningful moments of your life did you actually plan? Maybe like meeting your best friend. Maybe it happened on the playground. Maybe it was in the bathroom at a concert. Or, maybe because someone randomly introduced the two of you, falling in love for me on the dance floor in another country, right? Tell me, how am I supposed to put that on a vision board? Landing in the opportunity that changed fucking everything. Finding the house that felt like home. Meeting a mentor who shifted your entire perspective on life. Discovering a hobby that became your greatest passion, right? That conversation that changed your life. Those moments, weren't manufactured. They surprised you. They unfolded for you. They happened. Why? Because you were living, right? Not because you stayed home trying to think your way there, trying to think your way into certainty. And I've been reflecting on this because I see a lot of this, especially in socials, But I feel like life really reveals itself to those who participate in it. not to those who are sitting on the sidelines waiting for every answer before they're even willing to begin, right? And I know that's really uncomfortable because our minds love it. They love to be certain. They want the 5-year plan, the guaranteed outcome, the promise that if we take this next step, that life is going to reward us exactly how we want it, exactly how we imagined. But that's not how life works. You know, the universe, God, source, life, whatever word feels true for you, it's alive, right? It's moving, it's evolving, it's responding, it's co-creating with you every single day, you know? And if life itself is alive, why do we expect it to behave like a spreadsheet? You know, as if we can map out every single twist and turn and predict every chapter and control every outcome. We cannot. You cannot pin down something that's constantly moving. You know, it's like you can't negotiate with the ocean. You know, you can't tell the tide when it's coming in and when it's going out. You don't demand a wave to reveal itself, you know, before you just paddle for it. You know, you learn to read it. You trust it, you move with it, you respond. Life asks exactly for the same thing. It's not a contract, it's a dance. It's a co-creation. It's a beautiful part about this dance is you don't have to know every step. You don't have to know every step, you know? When the music begins, it begins. You just have to be willing to get up and dance, you know? Let me just paint you a picture to make this super clear for you. Let's say it's Friday night. You're super excited. You had been thinking about this one restaurant that you wanted to go to all week. You know, you built the whole experience in your mind. You have a cute outfit picked out. You're probably drinking champagne, getting ready, you know, and it comes time to go to this restaurant and you pull into the parking lot. And what happens? The restaurant is, in fact, closed. Okay, super sad. Now, in that moment in time, you have a choice. You can take that as this ruined my night, you know, like super disappointed, got all dressed up, you know, drank champagne as I got ready and the restaurant's freaking closed. Or I wonder what else is possible, right? So instead of driving home frustrated, you make the conscious choice, you know, to go wander a few streets over. And then what you find tucked away is this little cute restaurant, this little tiny thing that you've never seen before, like this hidden gem in the corner. There's no sign, and you walk in, and guess what? It's open. And guess what? The food is incredible. The owner comes over and they tell you their whole life story and they tell you everything about how the restaurant started, and it makes you love it even more. And you end up talking to the couple next to you, okay, at the table right next door. And then you laugh. And you stay longer than you planned, and your whole night is completely different than what you had predicted in your mind. And years later, it's still one of your favorite memories, right? Now, here's the question. If the original plan had worked, you know, would you have ever found this restaurant, right? Probably not. And I think this is exactly how life works, okay? We've become so attached to the first plan, the first timeline, the first job, the first love, the first version of us, you know, of how we think life is supposed to unfold for us, that the moment something does not go according to that plan, we call it failure. We call it rejection, bad luck, when really like it's redirection. Really, it's just you participating. Really, it's maybe like life whispering at you, not this way, not now, right? Keep walking. One of my favorite realizations lately is what falls apart isn't always a thing you're meant to keep, okay? Sometimes it's the very thing that was quietly constricting you. I've been finding this in my own journey, you know, and I've realized you don't always see these things in the moment that they're happening. You know, in the moment it feels pretty inconvenient. It can feel disappointing. It can literally feel like your life is falling apart. But then there's months later, sometimes it takes years later, you look back and you're like, I get it. I see it clear as day, you know. You realize that what came undone wasn't your life. It was this illusion that there was only one way forward, you know, and that moment that the illusion is loosened, you loosen, right? Life has this beautiful habit of rearranging us. It's not to punish us, it's to expand us far beyond what our mind can comprehend, you know. introducing us to people we would have never met, places that we would have never gone, versions of ourselves we would have never discovered if everything had gone according to our plan, right? I think some of the greatest gifts in my life arrived disguised as closed doors, if I'm being completely honest. And it has nothing to do with, me planning them. But at the same time, when these things came up, I was willing to walk, right? I was willing to keep walking. I was willing to keep going. It wasn't a stop sign. And I hear this a lot where people say, like, follow your passion, right? Do what you love to do. You'll never work a day in your life. Your purpose is going to find you. And yeah, I agree to a certain extent, but like I definitely absolutely believe joy is directional. I think things that make you feel most alive, the things that expand your heart space, the things that pull you into the present moment are always pointing you somewhere. They're clues. I feel like they're breadcrumbs. I feel like they're invitations. It's like here's where I think we get it wrong. We assume that because we're passionate about something that's the be all end all. It has to become the final destination. But what if it isn't? What if it's simply like a doorway to the next place, right? Let's take my example. Let's take surfing. Everyone knows. If you don't know, if you're new to my world, I'm obsessed with surfing. I love it. Travel the world for it. I will continue to do so. Okay, surfing is a huge passion of mine. I love the ocean with every cell of my being. Okay, it's shaped who I am. It's taught me patience and humility and presence and trust and flow. And honestly, I think so much of what I teach today, I first learned from the ocean. So naturally, I thought, on one part of my journey, I'll just be a surf coach. I'll be a surf instructor. This is perfect. And I did. In Australia, I was a surf coach. And I loved introducing people to the ocean. And I loved watching people stand up for their first wave. And I loved seeing their confidence grow in the water. It was beautiful to witness. But if I'm being completely honest here, there was also this little whisper inside of me where, yeah, I loved teaching, but a part of me kept looking out past the students, towards the lineup, towards what I thought I was missing, right? I wanted to go surfing. I wanted to challenge myself, right? I wanted to keep growing. And it's not like I was ungrateful for that position at that time. And it's not because I didn't love the work, but my soul was asking for me to do something for expansion. My soul wasn't asking for me to teach surfing, okay? And it was a hard pill for me to swallow because I had to let go of this idea that my greatest passion had to become my profession, okay? I had to be okay with the fact that surfing simply was my first love, right? It doesn't have to be my forever job. It was my first love. It will forever be my first love. It is still my love, but it doesn't have to be my forever job, okay? And that changed things for me because it made me realize something. Because maybe it's like we don't have one purpose in life. Maybe we have many purposes in life. Maybe purpose isn't one final destination. Maybe it's a series of chapters, each one preparing us for the next, right? Each one revealing something we couldn't have learned any other way. And then suddenly there's so much more freedom because I stopped asking, is this the thing I'm going to do forever? And it's more like, what is this season trying to teach me? Same thing happened when I, lived in Australia. After yachting, I built an entire life in a different country across the world, became a body worker, had a clinic, worked at a clinic, ran retreats, had beautiful friendships, created a home, and genuinely thought this was my place. This is where I will be. This is it. This is where my story stays, for chapter to chapter. I was not planning to leave, I wasn't looking for another chapter. And then one random night, I met the love of my life on the dance floor. And, it's like, how do you even, I couldn't make this shit up. It's like, how am I supposed to predict that? I couldn't. But life had a chapter for me that my mind could not have imagined. Now, I'm recording this podcast, right, from Washington State in the forest, okay? How was I supposed to make sense of that back then? I couldn't have. It's impossible, but at the same time, I didn't need to. And this is the point I'm getting across here. When I look back at my life, it's all been like that. Like the yachting wasn't planned. The Australia wasn't planned. Becoming a body worker, I would have never thought to do that. I was trying to learn more about my own body, retreats, entrepreneurship, podcasting, finding my own voice and the way I want to express it, right? None of it followed a perfectly logical plan. Each chapter simply introduced me to the next. Each chapter expanded my identity just enough, right? That I could recognize the next opportunity standing in front of me. And I think that's honestly how life works. You don't need to know the final destination. It's almost like you just need to find the courage to follow the breadcrumbs that are given to you in the present moment. Sometimes the thing you're saying yes to isn't the destination. It's a bridge. The surf school, teaching, surf instructing, not a destination. It was a bridge. Australia wasn't the ending for me. It was a bridge. Every experience has carried something I couldn't have received in any other way as well. And I wonder how many of us are trying to build a house on something that was only meant to be a bridge, when it was only ever designed to carry us somewhere new. And I think that's, where we misunderstand our purpose. We've turned it into this giant treasure hunt, as if it's somewhere out there. There's one perfect answer, one perfect career, one perfect business, one perfect calling, one thing we're going to do forever and ever and ever. And if we don't find it, that we've failed at life. And it makes so much sense to me why so many people feel stuck or why they feel lost. They're trying to solve a mystery that was never meant to be solved in the first place. I don't think purpose is a destination. I think purpose is alive. I think it is, because it's alive, I think you evolve. As you evolve, it evolves, right? It's changing as you're changing. The woman I was at 22 years old could never have imagined this life. She couldn't have imagined, this podcast. She couldn't have imagined mentoring women all over the world. She couldn't have imagined living in Australia. She couldn't have imagined meeting the love of her life. She couldn't have ever imagined living in Washington, or creating Unbound, none of that shit. And thank goodness she couldn't. If I tried to force that version of my life back then, it wouldn't have made sense. I probably would have talked myself out of it. It would have felt unrealistic and too big, which is kind of